Before you get into this powerful content and this conversation, I need y'all to do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button on the channel because that's the best way you're going to stay up to date with everything that's going on. Like, share, comment, review, and let me know what's going on, people.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's the Mitchell Report Unleashed podcast. And, brand new year, 2022. So much content, so much conversation, so many powerful, impactful guests. And today, I'm joined by an Emmy Award-winning media advisor, Mr. Vinnie. How's it going, my man?
Heyo, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. And I appreciate your time today on an afternoon. It's, I think, on both sides of the globe here, it's cloudy. And I
It
got
is
some snow
overcast.
looking at me right now.
It's not so
Right.
bad. Overcast tends to be the best light to use for creating content anyway. So gray days tend to be good, solid days for content creating.
I love that. So you're Mr. Media. You're Mr. Mr. Media, I like to call it. How did you get into this entertainment industry, my friend?
Oh, that's funny. Well, I appreciate the Mr. Media title. I don't know what that encompasses, but hopefully a whole lot. I got into the entertainment industry. How did I get into the entertainment industry? Passion and curiosity. There was no such thing as talent development when I entered into the workforce in the late 90s. There was no talent development department at MTV until a guy named Rod Asa and myself launched it in 1999. And from that department, we cast all of the VJs, the video jockeys and hosts on MTV, MTV2, MTV3, MTV.com, and a bunch of MTV International affiliate properties, but also Osbournes and Newlyweds and Punked, and a lot of cool long form programming came out of it. So curiosity, tenacity, fortitude, I would also say, is how I got into. I'm from Staten Island. That's about as close as I can claim to having any connection to New York City. My family was not in media. Um, I had no cousin to call on, no aunt or uncle who was already, doing it. So, but I had no expectations. I didn't know I was going to be. I ended up getting into a casting position at MTV Networks, and that was a result of a couple of steps that I took while I was in college that ultimately gave me the credibility to be in casting at a young age, and just tenacity. That's how I do it. That's how I still do it, and that's how I stay in it. By the way, too, that's the trick. The same tricks that
I
you use to
love it,
get in,
man.
you got to use those same tricks day after day, year after year, for sure.
I know. And if you think about the last 2 years, we have had to use tenacity, resiliency, a whole bunch of other different, words and things like that. So when you were, in the MTV world and things like that, what was one of your favorite moments that you could remember that was like one of your biggest highlights?
Oh, that's cool. Like some of the very first shows that I worked on were people that I was able to help get cast at MTV, and then because of the timing, we ended up staying at MTV for a decade or more, together. So I was lucky to have been brought into MTV at a time where they needed more talent, and I was able to bring in talent that stayed for decades. I remember the casting for Suchin that ultimately got her the position, as a news correspondent. I remember finding Gideon on the campus of his school. I remember the day. I remember finding Damien Fahey, who went on to host TRL for maybe 8 years after Carson left, and is now one of the co-EPs on Family Guy. I remember finding him in a basement of a radio station. There's so many off-camera moments that I remember that are so vivid, and it's because I got to see those people play out live in real action on TV, and I could literally. I remember. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. I was in the room when Beyonce auditioned for Hip Opera, and I remember when the note was given to for so we did the casting for we did the first take of the audition. Robert Townsend and Beyonce and I were in the room, and we did the next take completely silent. All Robert wanted to see was her eye contact, And I remember I kind of backed up a little bit with my little camcorder. I backed up and I zoomed in because I wanted to give her space. She's acting, so I want to give her space to act. And I remember he took my hand. It's funny. It's funny because I remember, you remember physical contact. He took my hand, and I was maybe a foot from her face, and I had to focus. And he's like, "No, I want to see her eyes. I want to see only her eyes. I'm in the room. I can see everything else that's happening. I don't need to get the body. I just only am looking at the eyes." And I remember that note being given because she was in the room and she heard, like, it was her note too. It was our note. It was my note to capture her eyes. It was her note to focus, unlike she was maybe doing in the previous take, or it gave her a new direction and a new way to sort of hone in an angle. It's interesting as like a note from a director. Usually you would think there's like an emotional cue, but maybe sometimes just saying only look at one thing, only focus on one thing and do it again. Maybe that's the trick. And as I'm sitting here rambling about that moment, like I had my career is filled with so many of those amazing moments. And up until podcasting, I felt horrible because I kind of used to like hold them in. It was like my secret sauce, and I can share them with the people that I'm working with.
Yo, before we get into powerful conversations on this page, I need y'all to do me a favor. Head over to Instagram, free platform. I'm posting tons of free content each and every moment I can. Instagram Reels, Instagram posts, Instagram stories. Let's go. Continue the conversation.
But I'm not one to go on social media and sort of brag about those moments without giving it more context. I don't want those moments to leave without really understanding the impact they had. And just that note, focus. Maybe that's what the note was. And I watched, and people say that, that Beyonce really stepped into her own in that film, and from that came Sasha Fierce, and a lot of her performance mannerisms that evolved as a solo artist came from. So it was super cool. So I have and I get hit with them, whether it's a song, an anniversary. Now everything in my life now is 20 years ago when 20 years ago when Christina Milian was first on TRL. 20 years ago when Christina Aguilera was, it's been 22 years since I met Mandy Moore, which is just crazy because everyone thinks of her as,
Wow.
the baby in the group if you know her from music, or the adult, depending on how you know her. So, but it's just
Yeah.
it's been seeing those moments and processing them and seeing how awesome and how awesomely talented people can be, and how awesomely untalented people can be, and how both of them can do something that is resilient, is impressive, is impactful, based on how they're presenting their materials themselves. And I really became obsessed with that. And I'm happy to be able to help business owners, and not just talent brands and journalists and celebrities that I've been working with for the first 10 years of my career. For the last 15 years of my career, it's skincare, and it's services, and merchandise. Like I'm having fun helping people understand the mechanics of that celebrity brand world, that exists, that no
No,
that
it's
it,
so
that it
true.
exists.
Yeah, and it's quite crazy because like I interview so many different people, influencers, moguls, things like that in this space, and what I always get from a lot of them is they're human. They don't ever come with the ego. You get what I mean? And they're very transparent with their conversations. And I love that. That's why I love being in the space of podcasting. And we're going to
Oh,
get
yeah.
into this whole space of podcasting and things like that. Cause I got some, interesting conversation about that with you and things like that. But when we think about that thing called stardom or celebrity or influencer, what's one thing you could tell the audience that are in this space of content creation, like me and you, right?
Hmm.
Podcasting, to not ever overlook when it comes to that? Because there's so many people want the clicks, the likes, and all this other good stuff, but some people change. It changes a lot of people. The views change
Hmm.
people. The going viral changes people. But what would you say to them, Vinny?
Yeah. So, first off, have met, our total audience consists of many audiences. Even if you're even if you're only on Instagram, you have an Instagram feed audience and you have an Instagram stories audience and you have an Instagram reels audience that combines, the two worlds, and that's where real growth sort of happens. So just understanding that, unlike television that has one frequency for the East Coast and one opportunity for people, unlike television, how a lot of us think of media, our audience is actually built of dozens, if not hundreds, of tiny ways that we connect with people. So understanding that the loudest voice is often the voice that gets heard. It's not always the most correct or representative voice that's out there. I would say that it's awesome. How lucky are you to get immediate feedback, whether it's a hater or not? If someone's reacting to your content, and that's something to take in. But what I would take with a grain of salt, but at the same time, I would also take with the weight of the world, is the energy that you're getting back from that conversation. So it's less about what the person is saying, it's how they're saying it. Are they in your comments? Okay, so people like to connect with me in my comments. Maybe I can resolve this in the comments with this person and walk them through. Would they rather it be in the DMs? Again, another audience, in Instagram, a whole separate world that no one even sees, by the way. If people saw how many DMs we all have every day, they'd realize how much really they think, because we liked 5 pictures on Instagram, we're only on for a couple of minutes, but we only liked 5 out of 100 images
Yeah.
and talked to like 20 people on DM. So there's just a lot of action that's happening. So that being said, how lucky we are to be able to get an immediate response on energy for the content we're creating. And television 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, that didn't happen. Even from TRL, when I was on TRL in Times Square, it was out content. We were putting content out. Unless you were in Times Square in that room, asking for your band, or they would always have the microphone down in Times Square. That was the only way we knew what was really how the content was being received, how the videos were being received, how the artists were being received. So I would use that as a way to, on any type of feedback, good or bad. Again, grain of salt, weight of the world. Acknowledge the return on energy, and I'd also see how you can turn that. It's in comedy. If you ever take a comedy class, one of the sort of golden rules of comedy is yes and. So like, I want to stop the scene. It's never no. I don't. No, I have no clue. No, I don't do that. It's always, hey, you're so and so, and some weird thing, and you have no clue what's coming to you. You say, okay, yes, and you're like down to go with it. I would use those opportunities as conversations. Like, you're trying to be social. There's lots of times we're in social situations where not everyone in the room, agrees with you, and we're not on stage being social. We're like in a small, intimate, little circle being social. Although Instagram specifically to me feels like being on a stage and talking to 50 people, as opposed to being in a small group of a circle with 5 friends where you're getting that type of feedback. And I would be empathetic to it. I would absolutely let it soak in, and I would understand what words are being used to connect with me. Now I'm going to address, what that person is feeling, or in maybe my next content, or in how I shape what I say next. Or chances are, what I love to do, because sometimes social media can kind of be so faceless. The audience can be so
Mm-hmm.
faceless sometimes. And this is, I wish I remember who told me to do this, because it was a brilliant, I think it was probably Brandon T. Adams, one of the smartest guys I know in video marketing. And he, in fact, I'm sure it was, when you're talking to somebody, regardless of how big your audience is, you don't have to let your whole audience know that you're making one video for this one person that needs to get this message. And I started even like putting photos of people, or I'll bring up their image on my phone, and I'll put it next to my computer, so I can really pretend like they're in the room with me, so I can really talk to them. And I use that as content, and I'm hoping that they know that, that's like when you're like, wait, is he kind of talking to me? I mean, he's not really talking to me, but is he talking to me? Yeah, chances are I'm that guy. Yes. Yeah, because
I know. Yeah.
I like that.
You
Because I
you know,
can. And you matter. You, as a person of one audience, that matters more than millions. It does, because that one person
no, so true.
is, make or break. They're
No, so
your
true.
number one fan or not.
You know, you say so many gems that are there because it's like when you do like solo pieces, right? It's different when you're doing an interview. But when you do your solo pieces, it's like there's so many times people don't understand is if I want to say something and connect with my audience, how many times that gets taken. There's sometimes because you're like, okay, did I say something crazy there? Okay, that didn't come out right. And
Yeah,
you start getting into these spaces where you're just like, okay, I've had to shoot like a 2 minute video like sometimes 20, 30 times. Right. And so we were like,
yeah,
really? I'm like, yeah. Sometimes you get it one take. It all depends what you're doing. But it's
yeah.
very, very tough and things like that, you know?
And so, can I ask about that process, about maybe the theoretical process? So, let's say 23 is theoretical and an extreme amount of retakes. But what would have been the problem that that was causing you to take 23 takes? Was it that we weren't being specific enough to the audience, or was it that the message wasn't right? Because it sounds like the audience was the missing factor here. Yeah.
So you sometimes want to have certain phrases that you want to say when you get into the conversation where you're connecting in front of the camera. And I feel like what ends up happening for me is the mind moves faster than the mouth. And then you're
Me
like,
too.
there's that pause. And then you're like, oh, wait, retake. And I don't want to chop it, keep editing it. And then people are going to be like, how authentic is this really? Sometimes you gotta capture those wonky moments, where you're like, okay, cut, you know what I mean? And things like
Hmm.
that. But, the mind goes sometimes faster than the mouth. And then you're like, how does that sound? And you watch it, you're like, mm-mm, let me just retake this. Let me retake this. And then you go back into it, try to recapture that moment. And then it's like, okay, I got to do take 3, take 5, so on and whatnot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Your mind goes faster than your mouth. Your ears go slower than your mind. So this is a really hard paradox to keep, present in, especially, and that's what's difficult sometimes about um, Zoom or some of the other recording instruments. Even when you're just a split second off, those social cues, audio cues that we're used to with face-to-face, peer-to-peer conversations, because are easily sort of that whole premise is deconstructed, when timing changes, and that's really what that is.
No, absolutely.
That's really what
So
that is.
let's talk a little bit about adversity. What adversity did you have to overcome if there's that one particular time? And I feel like again, it goes into like content creation. It goes into being on those, rooms or being in those rooms that you've been in that you've had to face that the audience may face doing the exact same thing. And how can they bounce back from that?
Oh yeah, sure. So, I mean, to be honest, again, time is such a factor in adversity. So I just really want to acknowledge that. And I mean, I'm not the first person, I won't be the last person to say that this too shall pass. And it really is something that I hold on to, even in the most exciting moments of my career, even when I get the green light for a series, which to me is even more exciting than when it premieres, by the way, because my job is before the TV show hits air. That's my job. If I'm on set, then uh-oh, something's getting recast, someone's getting some producer, something's changing. I'm there to keep the systems going smooth. And in the beginning part of my career in the late 90s, where reality TV really was something that was just beginning to be explored, it's easy for me to look back at the stars that I tried to make hosts and the hosts that I tried to make stars. And I can sit here and fill you in on all of the failed opportunities and missed opportunities. But ultimately, it was time that, to me, so knowing that time is a factor that will change, that's nice to me, that any given circumstance I put my in, if I'm working with the same people, for example, because sometimes we find our crew, sometimes our crew is 15, 20 people deep, sometimes our crew is 1,500 people deep, depending on what your services are and how you can work, and I think I found my crew. I think I found a solid group of thousands of people that I've either worked with directly in production or I got to meet. This is the cool part of my career now. The people I met in castings where I wasn't successful in getting them on their shows. But what we did in that casting room stood out because, a casting is not only the opportunity for you to be in front of a camera, edited by a casting director, and then presented to a producer. It's also the opportunity for me to meet you as a person and as a casting director, knowing that I'm the person who's going to be presenting you, to the producer. And in that casting room, I've seen so many wonderful mistakes happen. And I think adversity I think here's what I'm struggling with this, because there's financial goals and there's creative goals. And financial goals are I was 100% right. And creative goals was I was 100% wrong. Two completely different, metrics of success here. And this is like sort of the intersection that I've been in my entire life, because all of my creative properties have to return value, for my clients or for the platforms, the networks that I'm working on. So that being said, with time and believing in myself, believing in, my core talent, which, to be honest, is I say my core it's weird, because I would say part of it is there's like a passion and power part. That's my core talent. I don't know how to explain that as a service, other than I know how to get people at networks excited about your show who don't know you. I know how to get producers excited about hiring you to be the host of a show or a contributing producer, or will invest. I'm also the person that platforms and networks talk to and say, hey, we're launching Discovery Plus. We're launching these. What are talent opportunities out there that we could be looking for? I like connecting the dots and connecting the pieces. So, and that's a risk. So there's a lot of adversity that comes in that, but with time. And I think that I'm thinking of relationships. I'm thinking of how hard I tried to get Khalees to be a VJ back in the day. And then ultimately she married Nas, and we did me and Mr. Jones 10-episode reality series, shot in the can. Couldn't be more. It's literally the black newlyweds. It's so needed in 2006 from MTV. And then I got the phone call that they were not going to air the show at all. And I had to go tell Nas and Khalees that, by the way, because
Holy.
nobody wants to deliver that message other than the guy who got to tell them all the good stuff, throughout production. I'm the same guy who calls them to say, you got the green light. That's why I know it. I know it's coming, but that's, by the way, and that's the thing. And it was a great series and never even got to hit air. By the way, the decision was because MTV was making room for another spinoff from Laguna Beach, which ended up being The Hills, and that series sort of filled the same time slot, and so that moment was gone. But it, during it's such a bummer, for that series to not have gone. However, it cemented a foundational relationship that I have with both of them now independently. It was Nas's first EP credit on TV, which is so cool. And he's gone on to create, more and more. Even Nick Cannon, I was part of bringing Nick Cannon in from Nickelodeon to MTV. He was supposed to sort of tap Carson Daly's spot and was going to take over TRL. That was our plan, but Nick wasn't into that daily show idea. Times Square.
Then you started Wildin' Out, right? You started Wildin' Out.
And he pitched Wildin' Out, and it was like September, October. He pitched Wildin' Out. MTV passed on it. He was dating Kristin Milian at the time. They went for Christmas break and came back with tape. Christina was the other celebrity on the other celebrity team. And by the way, Nick and Christina have great. I mean, if you've seen any other movies, they had great chemistry together on screen. So it was like, and it was such an awesome duo to pitch that for MTV to finally conceptualize what Nick was talking about. That it wasn't just putting celebrities in uncomfortable, awkward, comedic possibilities, but it was tapping into their strengths. And also there was an entire culture that would support it. That's why the set was built the way that it was, and it wasn't, on a brick wall. Like so super, super cool. And I bring those up when you ask a diversity, because those were projects that were almost passed on or failed, that have gone on to become, really successful because they were given time. No one quit on it. Nick didn't quit. Nick doubled down, invested, came back, and then gave us a second shot, by the way, which he contractually didn't need to do. What a
Good.
bummer, though, because like, what a bummer MTV owns that and not him.
And you know
But
what?
that's
You
the
know what's so
timing of content.
interesting?
That's the timing of content. That's
Yeah.
what happens now.
And what's so interesting about this conversation? A lot of the things that you're saying, I'm not privy to the knowledge, but I know some of the key points, like Nick Cannon dating Kristin and stuff like that. And like for me to you, it's like you're such the important piece because you're like the onion, and every time I mention something or ask a question, it's another layer that's getting peeled and peeled and peeled and peeled and peeled. You know what I mean? And things like that. And I appreciate that with you. So
Oh, thanks.
let me ask this question.
Uh,
Why the move? Why the subtle move to why we're here podcasting? Why did you make
yeah.
that move to go to podcasting?
In 2006, I created a podcast with Fat Man Scoop and his wife called Man and Wife. I wanted to have I grew up watching Loveline on MTV. I actually got to work on it in the late 90s and the beginning part of my career, and then that was gone too. So in 2006, Scoop came to me with the idea that he was launching a podcast, and I said, Scoop, this is a video podcast, and in 2006 this is. He's like, where am I going to put it? You put it on the internet. And by the way, you record it on your bed because it's a man and wife, and like we should be in a space that's private and sexy and just you. And by the way, and I gotta talk to them. I gotta talk to them about telling the story. But we developed it, and we hit a couple of rooms. We got real intimate in figuring out what room would be there and what would be the best setup. But we took that idea of a man and wife in bed and we brought that on stage. And I was able to sell that to MTV. Literally, I think, for me, it's the first time I converted a podcast into a TV show. It was in 2006. And that's me coming from the network side. What shifted over the last 2 years is we have iPhones and we have the ability as people, as consumers, as people who don't traditionally identify as being creative, we now have tools that only creatives had. And I realized that I can teach business owners, I can teach people who have unique brands who are making big impact in this world. I can teach them to podcast because, as I said earlier about Nick Cannon, because you can own the podcast. When you own your content, it is a completely different story. You're financing it differently. You're monetizing it completely differently. You're talking about, say, a one-time sales transaction versus multiple layer, multiple dimensional licensing agreements and marketing, and you're missing out on a tremendous amount. Also, in the last 2 years, I've been able to convert additional podcasts. And I have a podcast that got turned, one podcast that's a scripted project in development at HBO Max and an unscripted project that's in production now at Netflix. And that's just the power of creating a podcast, which means organizing. So like I work with lawyers and I work with experts who have to organize. Not a lot of people walk around with documents and spreadsheets that perfectly articulate. So it takes a moment to compose your thoughts. But once you've done that, once you've thought about your top 10 greatest strengths or your the five things that matter most, suddenly I have a piece of collateral, some information from you that I can start leveraging in unique ways that I know based on what I hear from producers that I'm constantly in touch with, just as friends that are like they're jumping from job to job saying, oh, now I got to go find 5 financial analysts for this show. And that bug I go right to LinkedIn and I'll start putting out, financial analyst job search. I just organize it. I just want to attract the talent, to be honest. You said like as an onion, so there's like these layers. I want to attract it as like this magnet. So like there's, but an onion that'll bring, some good onion. So it matters. And I think also, especially coming out or not coming out of COVID, going into this third year or however long it is, I don't know, small businesses have such an impact and will continue to have such an impact on humanity, on the decisions on how we treat our neighbors, on how we value ourselves. Talk about self-care. It's hard to talk about self-care without first talking about business. It's usually where people start with self-care is a lot, something about
So
work.
true.
So I really firmly believe that in the small to medium-sized business, like, just even up to publicly traded companies. I've been in a publicly traded company. I've launched, a couple of dozen MTV international affiliates, and I helped create the framework for how to run a talent department, how to run a sort of global brand like MTV on a local level, because talent that's community, that's perspective. So who we find as talent here might not be, or on a certain channel or a certain demographic. So, but that's the big change. I want people to own their content, and by owning your content, the amount of opportunities that come to you, it's so crazy to think about this. So I'll say this. So there's this influencer platform called Maverick, MAVRCK.co. You go there and you put in your
Okay.
information, and that's like where people who want to be influencers on social media, they put their name on the hat, and the brand hires this agency. They go through all the data and they pick you. I'm not allowed to say what the client is, but I can confirm that I've signed a deal with the client, my first one, which is cool because I don't position myself to be an influencer, but I don't look at influencer as the 4-letter word that some people think that it is. I looked at it as an opportunity. So here's what I have to post three pieces of content on a certain platform every single week.
Mm-hmm.
That was my deliverable. I have hours of footage of me and some of my favorite people in the entire world from my podcast, because like you, my podcast is video podcast.
Yeah.
So I went straight back to my Mandy Moore footage and Kristin and Millie. I got Ananda. I mean, I've been having a blast going back and finding segments that I can pull back and use to satiate this need that I have now, this deliverable that I have to serve on, that I now get to get paid on. So I didn't create it with that financial partner by my side, but I now have that financial partner by my side as I'm finding a way to amplify. So it wasn't part of my distribution strategy, it's part of my amplification strategy, which is surprising because most of us want to be paid from podcasting and distribution. That's where advertising happens. I want to get paid for everyone who sees this. And so there's that conversation. And that's why on Instagram Reels, they know that. That's why on Instagram Reels, they'll say, if you hit these thresholds, we'll pay you if you're part of that ecosystem and you subscribe to that, which I think everybody should. But some people
Mm-hmm.
won't do it because they look at being creative or being an influencer as a 4-letter word, because they
Yeah.
weren't taught because they were taught that there's a difference between art and science. They were taught, I'm 45. Like, that's definitely what I was taught in school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said earlier, our financial goals, our creative goals, they're the exact opposite. Imagine if I creatively said, "Oh, this is amazing. I hit it out of the park. I took no risk." What?
you,
that is not a creative win for me, at least.
you know what I get here? Like, it's just, as me, like, some people look at me and they think, oh, they see the numbers. Oh, you're an influencer. You're a local celebrity. I'm like, no, I'm still Rory. But what I get from you, that you're just a little breakdown there, is like, this is a masterclass you just gave us. And now when I go back and I listen, I got to get my pen and I'm going to be like writing some things down because you said some brilliant points. So
Oh, I appreciate
you
that.
speak about you speak about your podcast and things like that. Is what is the main purpose when you think of when it comes down to online? Because that's how I found you. I found like Instagram. Like, I tell people this when I go to look for certain people.
Hmm.
Instagram is a very, very interesting thing. Your hashtags, you search people. It's crazy when you're in this podcasting space. We all know the same people. You talk to one person, it's like you're talking to everybody, right? So it's like a big family,
Hmm.
it's like a big community. And then I think about it and I'm like, how do we stand out? You stand out. Some people look at it and they say, well, wait, Vinny's got a blue notification check mark. What does that mean? It means he's verified. It means he's a person of influence. But how do people that have a smaller channel try to stand out from the rest of us? Is what would you say?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that question. And I know that a lot of people have that blue check. So I know that after the blue check gets your attention, I've got to step it up because I know there are a lot of other people who have that blue check who um, uh, would underqualify perhaps is the word, or you're still
Mm-hmm.
questioning how they got that, or you know they got it like before like 2013 or 2000, you know they got it like so long ago that the time sort of changed, and you come up with all of these reasonings why this person has this blue verified check mark. I knew that the blue verified check mark is an important part for me as a creator. It was an important part of my profile identity because I'm not an influencer. I'm not hyper active on Instagram. I don't claim that I'm number one on anything on Instagram. I claim that I have the best. If you want to get a TV show sold, uh, I have every single buyer, producer, TV agent. I have every podcast executive. That's my audience. So I don't even want I don't want to make money in advertising when I know that I have a captive audience of executives that can see this clipping of this podcast and then say, hey Vin, I'm looking for like a podcast, that guy Rory was cool, can I get his information? That happened. That's why I do this, and I do it for
Mm-hmm.
free. And there's no way I'm monetized. There's never pay to be a guest, and I'm never paying. There's no way I'm ever going to involve direct money with my pocket. It's way too precious of a creative commodity for me. And and it happens, the development of it happens too live in the moment, for me to ever pull back um, in that. But standing out and being impressive is an important part actually of I have one-on-one coaching and I have a master class, and I'm excited to teach people. So it's a great question, but I'm excited to teach people how to stand out, because the consistency doesn't come in the form only and solely of posting. Consistency comes in maybe a color, a lip shade, the type of hair. When I'm launching talent, Vanessa, Lachey, and Susie Castillo, we'll always talk about this because they kind of launched on MTV's TRL at the same time. And Vanessa always had straight hair and Susie always had curly hair, just so that the audience could start to identify people. And then we can play, so you want to give some physical, emotional consistency is a big one, Are you always grumpy? When you're on, are you always happy?
Exactly.
That's a big thing, especially when people find you, know that they're going to binge. So if they're gonna binge and they're gonna give 5 minutes of their life to looking you up, and they can't figure you out because you're not consistent and you're all over, and you're talking about 80 billion different things that aren't registering to them cohesively, that's not going to help you stand out. What I try to do is talk in silos. So I said earlier, I do have very visual images of the people that I talk to. I will create a content about my dog eating a carrot, and I'll have strategists in mind when I'm doing it, or I'll have on-air
Wow.
talent in mind, or I'll have podcasters in mind. I really make that specific content because I think that that's what helps me stand out, is that when people feel like you're talking to them, it's like that idea of being in a crowd of thousands, and your favorite celebrity sort of points you out of you can do that in social media on an intimate and authentic basis. See, like I really do want to talk to strategists right now. Now, what's the strategy about this carrot, and how can this carrot and my dog? You know what I mean? Like what? But that's how my
Mm-hmm.
brain works. That's how I'm sort of wired that way. And that might just be only for strategists. My hashtags will reflect that. My caption will reflect it. The words that I use, and I love using buzzwords. I love using other people's words. That's another. You want to know a trick? I learned this in Spanish class in 6th grade, when they would ask you your question and then we had to come up with the answer. And I learned that the answer is literally just repeating the question, pretty much, with and
Wow. Okay.
you change the word,
Yeah.
right? It's like, como se llama? Mi llamo. Like that's like you literally gave me two to three words here. So I'll use your words and connect with you the way that you know how to be spoken to. Because to your point, when you're all over the place, when you're talking about different topics, and it's really hard to stand out when you're trying to, you know, stand in some ways, I guess. And also stand up. It's important to stand up. So it's important to get up and be vocal about things, whether they be social causes or technology that's working. It's important to have, you know, a positive stance on things that are working and share that. And I like that. So I focus on those wins as opposed to like, you know, I have a pretty positive disposition anyway. I tend to see the better part of people, and I think that that's what's helped me be in TV for so long, and why some of my shows have such high comedy, you know, or those characters are extremely comedic. Um, it's been a long time since Newlyweds, or like, you know, since a show like that's really had so many people be able to repeat, you know, a line from one little episode. So, um, but that, and it goes back to consistency. I hate the word consistency because it's been dumbed down to posting over and over again. That's not what I'm
Yep.
talking about. Because I have a hard time with rewarding people solely for the fact that they only show up. Because in casting, I'm not looking for the good. I'm looking for the great and the exceptional. And sometimes those people don't even see that in themselves. And I was lucky to have been trained by some of the best people in media to spot talent and be able to pull it out of them and organize it. And you could do that with podcasts, and you can
Yes, you
change.
can.
And
Yep.
you know what? I woke up the other day. I said, I was talking to Quddus, one of the VJs from MTV. And I said, you know, maybe I'm done interviewing. Maybe I met everybody that I want to interview on my podcast. Why do I got to go meet people to keep talking? Y'all are like the 80 people I talk to anyway. Like, we're
Yep.
good. This seems like, you know, and it occurred to me like, by the way, getting great guests is not a growth strategy. So, you know, I love being here with you, but I'm assuming I was not picked because you have the expectation that millions or hundreds of my ravishing Vinnie Potestivo fans will flock to find this. It was more about this
Nope.
conversation, right? As the creator that we can make. So that's where the guesting thing, that's going to change in podcasting. You know, I do have a celebrity heavy podcast, so I do get asked how have I been able to get, you know, certain celebrities. Sometimes I don't think they're meant to be insulting, but sometimes it's been dumbed down to, well, you worked at MTV, so that's how you got it. And I'm like, yo, like thousands of people work at MTV because, but
Yeah.
I don't want to argue. I ain't here to. Whatever you think is what you
No,
think,
but
and now I know. Now I know what you think, and I know
yeah.
how my
You
next.
know, yeah, Vinny, it's so crazy because I get the same thing too. Because some people see the, like I said, the influencers and the names, and they're like, "How are you doing all these people?" And some people think it's because of the vanity. It's not about the vanity.
Yeah,
It's about that I feel like when I watch these people's content, that I can relate once I get into the coliseum of recording with them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And it brings a side and it brings a light. And sometimes I'm not really talking. I'm just firing off the questions because I'm like, I'm mesmerized because of the answers that I'm getting. And I just know in the back of my mind, the audience is going to be able to say, damn, Vinny or that person or this person, they really connected. They really spoke to me in such a way and things like that. Real quick, before we get out of here though, because you
Yeah.
talked about your one-on-one coaching and you have a master class and things like that. Can we go into a little bit of a breakdown, like what that's involved? And is there like a program right now going on, or is there something coming down the road?
Yeah, sure. I'm launching another 90-day. I think it's launching officially the first week of February, but we're signing people up now. And it's literally built for creatives who need business influence and business minded people who are looking for creative inspiration. And in our 90-day process, I want to help you just not only make media that matters. And by that, I mean the way we're structuring the media, the segments that we might be creating in a podcast. Segments are important to me because I can lift them and I can license them. So I can have a single podcast that has several segments in it, and I don't have to always have every single segment in my podcast, but I have a couple of media partners that look forward to my content. They'll pay me $150, $250 if I can just lift a segment and give it to them. So now I create my content with that and in my flow, and I'm already doing it. So it's like that. So I love that. So helping people put structure, a lot of times, how do I monetize my content comes after, the launch of the podcast. So I have to really address it up top, and I can give you, 20 examples of how to monetize a podcast directly or indirectly that don't include advertising, because that's really, you're not monetizing your podcast. Advertising is monetizing your audience, and that's a different conversation. So I'd love to help you with that. But
I
I want
love
to
that. Yep.
teach you how to win awards. I teach them how to win awards, and then I will apply, and then we will hopefully win awards together. Last year, I won my first Silver Communicator Award, my first Gold W3 Award, and my first Emmy in December. And I put my action plan for award to be an award-winning creator into play. You have to apply, you have to pay to be considered, to be nominated, and then depending on the type of award system you've entered, the award can either be against other projects or it could be against yourself. So I have this awesome list of awards that I'm excited to share that will help people who aren't applying for awards, whether you have no budget or some budget, win awards. We want to be award-winning creators. Why? Because people look on award-winning lists for people to collaborate on. So you asked earlier, how do you stand out? I win awards. That doesn't come from making content. That comes from applying for awards after, you know what I mean? And I do it with a group of people who believe in winning awards. And those are people who are spending, that's where I get my philanthropy gene. Those are hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going back into this universe directly, and kindness and generosity are people who are winning the awards, not for ego. Credits, I stand out. I have a lot of credits. I take credit. I learned that not to say I have a hard time with the word. I can't even think of it right now. Expect when I expect it. I expect it. I don't think
Yeah.
expect is the word. When you sort of think you're owed it. Deserve is the word. I couldn't even think of the word. It's so removed from my vocabulary. I don't deserve any credits, I would think to myself. I don't deserve executive casting director credit. I'm just all part of the team, And I realized, by the way, in sitting in my privilege, how detrimental that idea that I wasn't deserving of something that I worked hard for, that I am entitled to stand up to that. Because what I can do with that title after I claim it, look, there's a whole generation of executive casting directors and producers that I've worked with directly that are shine because of those opportunities that I could have claimed for my own and continued to casting. That was not my goal. Stay in casting. My goal is to make a big change, and I realized that if I have a good title, then I can get someone else a good title. So now I take those titles. I get credit. I make myself discoverable. I have red carpet moments. I set time on Clubhouse or on Instagram. I tell people when I'm going to show up, and then I show up. It's a red carpet moment. That's what celebrities do. You talk about your big moments. Like I'm looking for like my residency. That's and my podcast is my residency, to be honest. Because my Celine Dion residency is my podcast. That's where you can catch me every single day as a podcast. And then I also, in our program, work with them on distribution, amplification, analytics, and auditing. So it's not just about launching it, but it's about understanding it in real time, how you can be making tweaks and changes to what you are creating. So that, to your point, it's not about the posts, it's about the message, and that you're focused on a much higher level of communicating than per post. No one's going to get, if you can get what I'm trying to say out of one post, then I am not doing a good job. Because I am complex.
Exactly.
I am onion. You said it. You know what I mean? You cannot, if you get my whole thing in one post. So I appreciate the time, man. This is an awesome conversation.
No, this is a great conversation. It's powerful indeed. And where can everybody, check you out on, social media, Instagram per se, and if they want to book one-on-one coaching and they want to get into the masterclass?
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm Vinnie Potestivo on all social media. VinniePotestivo. It shows up after Vinny usually, hopefully. My website is VPE. So it's one of those, VPE.tv is my website, where I have lots of information about masterclasses and one-on-one opportunities. Whether you're launching our product, whether you're relaunching our product, or relaunching a career. Again, as I mentioned, like I do work with a tremendous amount of small and medium-sized business owners, founder-led businesses that tend to want to be in their content because they enjoy showing up and the change that it makes, not just the sales part of it, but the change that it makes. And that's all the way back to your first question. Why am I doing this? Why the pivot? Because there's so much less ego in podcasting. There's so much ego in TV, and it's so hard in podcasting. No one is joining podcasting thinking they're going to be a star. You join a show on TV, you think you're going to be a star tomorrow. You launch a podcast, and you're like, all right, I got to do some work. I'm down to do the work, and I want to help people. Here's one more point, and I'll stop after this. I'm really passionate about helping people see success early in their creative path. If they don't see success early in their creative path, they're going to quit. If success means audience or partnerships or sponsorships or advertising, whatever success is. So I'm really like, I almost got choked up about it. I get really emotional about people quitting too soon because they didn't see. So anything I can do to help people be successful earlier in their career, it just happens to be that I'm good at it. And it's like, that's the key to longevity, is doing it early. You can't party all day if you don't start in the morning. So like, I'm excited to help people get started.
No, Vinny, you know what, man? Like, the transparency on this episode and just how you are is just a breath of fresh air. You know what I mean? Because I know when it comes to this space of just social, digital creation, there's a lot of ego, and you see it. You see it. You see it. You see it on TikTok. You can see it, and there's no, people don't know how to identify and connect and have conversations. And I've heard through the grapevine, people have tried to reach out to have this sit down conversation with their favorite TikToker, and it's like, null and voided. It's not happening because they think that they're bigger than who they think they're bigger than the audience now, and things like that. And it's quite a sad sight to see. But we need more people like you in this world, man, to always just
I appreciate
bring
that.
the wholesome conversation to life.
Well, we're out there. There are people like us out there. We just got to give them the tools. If it's about showing people how to set up a mic or how to ask a question, I'm down for that. I love it.
I love it, my man. Well, I appreciate you, and thank you for coming on the show.